Hello everyone, welcome to the course on simulating fluid flows using Python. A very warm welcome to everyone who have joined as a new member. I hope you can go through all the previous lectures, and if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to write down them in the comments. I'll try to reply to you ASAP, and I hope that you can reap the benefits out of this course. In the last lecture, we started our discussion on the two-dimensional diffusion problem. So we looked at how to get through a finite volume grid and how we can obtain a discretized equation. So that was sort of the theoretical background of what we would be needing in order to solve this equation. And as you know that it would be very painful if you try to solve this equation by handwriting, by handwritten calculations, and therefore we have to learn a little bit about coding. So in the lecture today, we are going to look at the Python basics in 2D, and specifically we are going to look at how to define 2D matrices. So because the temperature field or whatever the variable that you are thinking of in 2 dimension, it's going to be a 2D matrix. So we are going to look at how we can define those kind of variables in Python, and subsequently the kind of operations that we are going to perform on it. So the lecture today is sort of to give you an idea of the coding prerequisites in order to simulate the problem. And the final bit of lecture is about the indexing, a very important topic as to how you can define the indexes in your 2D matrix. And finally, we are going to talk about how the indexing would be related to the FVM grid. So remember that every element of your vector in one-dimensional case has some index or has some address. So in the same way, we are going to look at how those addresses are modified when we talk of a 2D situation. So without wasting any further time, let's get started. So since the world of Python is really huge, I am trying to cherry pick whatever would be really useful and whatever would be really needful for this kind of programming. So I'll only give out those commands that I think would be relevant. Of course, there are more than one ways to look at it, but I think that this might be one of the easiest ways in order to approach the problem. So the first thing is how we can define a 2D matrix. So typically, the matrices that we define usually are more or less zero or largely zero. So I'll try to explain how you can define a matrix, a 2D matrix, which is zero everywhere. So to initialize a zero 2D matrix in Python, we have a command called as np.zeros. And recall that this np is an acronym for the NumPy module. So if you have imported the NumPy module as, let us say, ABC, then you have to write abc.zeros. So once we write that, in the double brackets, we have to define the size of the matrix. So here I have written it as 5, 4. So when I write 5, 4, here 5 implies the number of rows and 4 implies the number of columns. So this is very important. You have to understand what the rows are and what the columns are, and then depending on how many rows and how many columns, you can put out this statement, and the output of this statement would be stored in the variable a. So a would be a 2D matrix which would have 5 rows and 4 columns with all elements being 0. So if I have to show you what that would look like, we would have something like this. So it would have 5 rows. So if I count from here, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So 5 rows and 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I used to struggle with it for some reason, I don't know what, but I just remembered it in the sense that rows are horizontal and columns are vertical. So hopefully you'll find your way to remember how these 2D matrices are defined. And if I look at the matrix now, so I have some numbers here. I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is nothing but the index of your row. So remember that these horizontal slices are the row, and as always Python starts with a 0 index. So the first row has an index of 0, and the second row has an index of 1, and the fifth row has an index of 4th. So remember how the counting is slightly lesser in case of when you try to count the number of row and the index. That was the same case in one dimensional scenario, that the first element of your vector, it had an index of 0, and the same pattern it is being followed in the 2D case as well. And similarly, you can observe that for the column index, the first column has an index of 0, the second column has an index of 1, and so on. So now, in order to look at it a little bit further, now I'm going to talk about the addressing or referencing or indexing. I'm just trying to make you understand how you would call a particular element in your 2D matrix, or what are the addresses or indexes of these 2D matrices. So this is actually very similar to what these row index and column index comprises of. So let us look at the first element here, the top left element here. So we know that it has a row index of 0 and a column index of 0, and therefore its index is simply 0, 0. I hope this is visible on the screen. And similarly, if I look at the next element, it has a 0th index row and the column index is 1. Therefore, the index of this element is 0, 1. So remember that the rowth index, the index of the row, would always come first and the index of the column would come next, just the way in which you have defined it. So you have defined 5 rows, so the row numbers are coming first, and the same goes for the index. So the index of the row and then followed by the index of the column. And similarly, you can have the indexes or the addresses of the rest 2 elements. And now if I look at this particular element here, I know that this has a row index of 1, whereas a column index of 0. Therefore, it has an index of 1, 0. And if you also observe, I am using a large bracket here. This is because Python understands, or if you want to call these elements, you have to use the large braces. So that's the same convention that I'm trying to follow, that you would need these large brackets in order to use these variables in your code. So now if I look at this particular element, we know that even though it's in the third row, the row index is 2 and the column index is 0, so it is 2, 0, and similarly for the other elements. So now if I want to arbitrarily find a particular element, for example this one, so this has a row index of 3 and a column index of 2. Therefore, the overall index of this particular element is simply 3, 2. I hope this is making sense, but I'll try to reinforce this idea through another example. So let us say we have some random matrix like this, which has 6 rows and 4 columns. So 6 rows because the final row index is 5, or you can even count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And we have got 4 columns. Now, suppose if this particular element is of my interest, that is 0.33. So we would look at how we can call for it or how we can refer to it. So again, we would use the indexes. So indexes are the address. So we look at the rowth index, which is 4, and the column index, which is 2. So now if I write the variable name, let us say a, of in the large bracket 4, 2, and if you hit enter, you would get 0.33. So that's one way in which you can locate a particular element. So in many cases, you might want to locate or refer to the entire row or the entire column. You can also do that very easily. So suppose that if I now want to locate or call for this entire row, that is the 4th row. So previously we had only looked at a specific element. So we could have defined 4, 2, but if you want to decide, or if you want to go for the entire row, the syntax is very similar. Rather than having 2 as the second index, you simply put a colon. So you have a, that is the name of the variable, 4, colon. So these are all large brackets, and if you hit enter, you would get the entire row. So this is very useful because sometimes whenever you are given a boundary condition in 2D scenarios, either on a horizontal or a vertical wall, you might have to define those variables or the value of those variables, and there you have to select that entire row or column. So this is how you can do that. And similarly, if I want to define or call for this particular column or any particular column, we know that here the column number is 3 or the index of the column is 3, and we have to call for all the rows. So wherever we want to call for all the rows or all the columns, we use this particular colon sign. So we use the same idea. So here the first index, it becomes the colon sign because I want to call for all the rows, and the second index corresponds to the column index, which is nothing but the number 3. So I hope that this is making sense. So wherever you want to refer for all the columns, you put the second index in your calling matrix or the calling variable as the colon, or if you want to calculate for all the rows that you want to slice a column, then you put your first index as the colon symbol. So hopefully try it out. Whatever Python editor or compiler you are using, just define a random matrix. You can use the zeros command as well, and then try to see whether you can call for a specific element or not. I hope it would work it out. Now let us look at how to use these ideas in your finite volume grid system. So we had defined a finite volume grid which looked something like this. Here we had a few points on the boundary that is defined as these red points. So now again, borrowing the ideas that we had discussed so far, the point that we have on the top left corner, it would have an index of 0, 0, correct? So if this point is 0, 0, then the point lying vertically downwards, this is the second row, and therefore it would have a row index of 1, whereas the column index of 0. And similarly, you can have the same for all the points that are lying vertically downwards, that their row index would increase by 1. In the same manner, now if I look horizontally, we know that this is the 0th index row, and we are only changing the columns. So if I count from here, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So even though this is the 6th column, but it would have a column index of 5. So gradually you will get a habit of this, that the index and the countings, they differ by 1, that is the index would be lagging by 1. So this is the same kind of syntax that you would also observe in C programming. If you would do that the index would always be lagging by 1, whatever your physical counting would be. So in this sense, you can have 0, 5 for the index of this top right point. And in the similar way, you can also obtain the index for any arbitrary point. So let us consider this one here. So because this is 0th row, this is the first row. So this is 1, 0, and this is first row, and again you can find that the index, the column index here, it would be 4. And also you can try to justify whether this 4, 2 is correct or not. So in this way you can correlate the indexing to the finite volume grid. So this was how you can map those two together, but our idea is to get until the discretized equation, and in order to do that we have to understand how the finite volume would be now linked to these indexing. So that's the next part. So in the previous lecture we had looked at, if my point of interest is P and if it's surrounded by these neighboring points, that is east, west, north and south, then we can define a finite volume around it, and therefore or thereafter we can obtain a discretized equation on it. So now again, if I draw the same kind of grid here with the finite volume, I have just taken out all these namings. So now what I want to do is, rather than dealing in terms of P, E and so on, I want to deal in terms of indexes, because that is what Python would understand. Python wouldn't understand if you put P or E. It would only understand in terms of the indexes. So let us say if I define the index of P as I, j, which is a very standard system, or at least in terms of Cartesian system, it is a very standard coordinate naming system if you want to define a arbitrary point. So if I take this particular point as I, j, so it essentially means that the ith row, or rather the index of this particular point in terms of row is I and in terms of column is j, or hopefully you can convince yourself that this is the address of that particular point that we were previously referring to as P. So now if this particular point is I comma j, and if I have to move horizontally to the east and the west point, so remember that the row would remain as it is. The index of your row, that is I, that wouldn't change, but if I move here, then the column would increase by 1, right? So the index of this point would simply be I comma j plus 1, and similarly the index of the other point, that is the west node point, it would be I comma j minus 1. So again, because we are not moving with the row remains the same, therefore the row index, that was I, it doesn't change. The only index that changes is the column index. And again, using the same idea, if I am now moving vertically, I know that the row would change and the column wouldn't. So this would remain of the same column. And if the row here is I know that for the north point it would be I minus 1, and again the column remains the same, that is j, and for the south point we have I plus 1 comma j. I hope that I am trying to explain it, but that's probably the best I can do in terms of explaining it. If you still don't understand it, please just simply draw a matrix or a grid where you have done some indexing, and then you can have a one-on-one correlation with that. But I'll try to explain it even better now. So let us see that we have I equals to 3 and j equals to 2. Let us take this particular example and let us keep this picture, the right picture, on the back of our minds. So if we take this particular example of I equals to 3 and j equals to 2, let us try to find it. So I equals to 3 implies that the index of your row is 3. So this is the 0, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. And j equals to 2 implies the column index. So 1, 2, and this 2, 1 and 2. So this particular point here, that is my 3 comma 2, and there I have also defined a finite volume. Now I have obtained my I comma j, and in the finite volume computations we know that we only need the immediate neighbors. So I can now define the indexing for my neighboring points. So if I call this particular point as P, so now I'm trying to combine the naming system, the Cartesian naming system and the indexing system. So I know that the neighbors are here, that is east, west, north and south, and if I put these values here, it is very easy to see that the neighboring points E and W, they would have an index of 3 comma 3 and 3 comma 1, and similarly the north and the south points, they would have an index of 2 comma 2 and 4 comma 2. I hope that with this example you can even get a better understanding of what we are trying to do. Please pause here and try to figure it out if you are not able to understand, because this is what we are going to do a lot in while writing the codes. So make sure you get it before we go further. So now we have obtained this particular set of indexing. So previously when we had the naming systems, that is P, E, N and S, then we know that we had the governing equation in the discretized form as APTP equals to AET plus AWTW plus ANTN plus ASTS. Now if I want to convert this equation, which I would understand, into another form which Python would understand, so what we have to do, we have to simply replace the P, E and so on by their respective indices. So we can write that AP into T of 3 comma 2. So here the variables are temperature. So therefore I haven't changed the coefficients, because these coefficients are something that we can define during the code, and these are usually, at least in the case of linear problems, they are constant values. So don't think that these are for now, these are depending on something like a temperature. They don't, they are simply a constant value, but our variable, that is the temperature here, that is not a constant value and that is subjected to change. So what I have done here, I have just replaced the temperature by their corresponding indexed values. So in this way, if I want to obtain the temperature at the point P, or rather the point 3 comma 2, I can take use of its neighboring temperatures and thus obtain that particular value. So you can imagine that we would be doing this particular procedure for all the grid points. So now let me look at the example that we had very briefly looked at into the previous lecture, which was of a square domain where we had one wall at a temperature of 1. So now in the context of lecture today, you can imagine that if you want to initialize this problem, you can simply define a zero matrix of whatever grid size you prefer. And if you want to say that the temperature of the top boundary is 1, so remember that this is like a row. So you can simply write that T of 0 comma colon. So 0 represents the first row, the colon represents the all columns equals to 1. So this is the kind of initialization that you can do for this problem, and then you can use the discretized equation that I have shown on the previous slide. So rather than going directly into the coding part, let me quickly describe what would be the algorithm like. So first step, like always, would be about the variables definition. So in this case, you would define certain scalars again, that is the grid geometry, the epsilon, the tolerance of the error that you want, and the number of iterations if you want to keep track on how many iterations would it take for the code to actually converge. And we'll also need some vectors or some rather matrices. So in this case, we would have the temperature and the new value of the temperature. So just like in the previous one-dimensional scenario, we would have the current value of the temperature and we would have the updated value of the temperature field. So again, the ideas would become more or less similar, that your convergence criteria would be that while the numerical error is greater than epsilon, so here you would need a while statement followed by an iterative formulation in which we do the calculation for all the grid points. Usually in this case it would be only for the interior grid points. We would compute the TP, or we would compute the new value of the temperature at our point of interest using that iterative equation. So hopefully you will be able to compile all these ideas together and try to at least write the script. So I would highly recommend if you at least try to write the script in terms of initialization and a general skeleton of the script, so that you have one while loop and maybe for loops. So remember that because we are dealing in terms of 2D, we would need two for loops, that is one for the index I and one for the index j. I hope this makes sense. And again, at this point, I think that I would like to conclude this lecture, that you might have learned some fundamentals and some basics about Python programming in 2D, and my focus was more or less on getting those indexing system right in terms of CFD grid systems. So in the next lecture, I would give you a preview of my Python script. I'll rather expect that you give me the preview before I give it to you. So probably I would ask in the community a few days later from now if you are facing any problems, and I would like to help you out with that. So rather than giving you a ready-made code, I would rather want that you try to hit the code, and if you face any problems, you approach me and I'll try to help you out. That would be a good learning process. And in the next lecture, I'll also talk about how you can visualize your data. So suppose you have obtained a converged solution or a converged temperature field, then how you can really visualize it. So in one dimensional case, we had looked at the plot command. So because it was a 1D data, so you can represent or visualize it as a line. So in this case, we would have a 2D data. So there are multiple ways. So we would look at few of the ways in which we can do that. So hopefully we'll look at these in the next few lectures, and until then, please stay safe and take care. I'll see you in the next one.